A fierce storm traps a beloved dog, but a boy's mysterious gift sparks a thrilling, odds-defying rescue. Before start, subscribe, pause, verve, like and share video with those who need love. The small town of Willow Creek nestled in a valley cradled by rolling hills, where maple trees stood like sentinels and the air carried the faint sweetness of wildflowers. It was the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's stories, where front porches held rocking chairs, worn smooth by years of shared laughter and quiet confessions. But on this late summer night in 2025, Willow Creek trembled under the weight of a storm that roared in like an uninvited guest, its winds rattling windows and its rain pounding rooftops with relentless fury. Inside the Thompson family's modest two-story home, the storm's chaos seeped through the walls. Mark Thompson, a broad-shouldered man with calloused hands from years as a carpenter, stood by the living room window, peering into the darkness. The power had flickered out an hour ago, leaving the house lit only by the soft glow of battery-powered lanterns. He squinted as lightning cracked the sky, illuminating the swaying trees in their backyard. "This one's worse than they predicted," he muttered, his voice tight with worry. Lisa, his wife, sat on the couch, her fingers twisting the edge of a knitted blanket. A schoolteacher with a gentle smile that could calm any storm in her classroom, she now felt her own nerves fraying. "Mark, come away from the window," she urged, her eyes darting to the ceiling as another gust shook the house. "We're safe in here. Let's just focus on keeping Ethan calm." Their 8-year-old son, Ethan, sat cross-legged on the rug, a flashlight clutched in his small hands. Unlike most children his age, who might have been cowering under blankets or clinging to their parents, Ethan seemed oddly composed. His dark brown eyes, wide and thoughtful, were fixed on the lantern's flickering light, as if it held secrets only he could see. A mop of unruly curls framed his face, and there was a quiet intensity about him that had always set him apart. Neighbors often remarked that Ethan seemed to feel things deeper than other kids, noticing the way he'd linger to comfort a stray cat, or pause to watch birds with an almost reverent attention. "Ethan, honey, are you okay?" Lisa asked, sliding onto the floor beside him. She brushed a curl from his forehead, searching his face for signs of fear. The storm's ferocity had kept her awake, imagining worst-case scenarios, trees crashing through the roof, the nearby creek swelling over its banks. But Ethan didn't flinch at the thunder. Instead, he tilted his head, as if listening to something beyond the storm's roar. "It's loud," he said softly, his voice almost lost in the wind's howl. "But something else is louder." He turned to look at the back door, which led to the yard and beyond it, the dense woods that bordered Willow Creek. His expression was one of concern, not for himself, but for something or someone else. Mark joined them, kneeling beside his son. "What's that, buddy?" "The wind's making all kinds of noises tonight." He tried to sound reassuring, but a knot of unease tightened in his chest. Ethan had always been different ever since he was a toddler. He'd cry when their old cat Muffin was sick, long before they noticed her limping. He'd point to the sky minutes before a flock of geese appeared, as if he'd heard their distant calls. Mark and Lisa had chalked it up to a vivid imagination, but moments like this made them wonder if there was more to it. Ethan shook his head, his small hands tightening around the flashlight. "It's not the wind. It's like a cry. Someone's scared out there." His gaze drifted back to the door, and for a moment his parents saw something ancient in his young eyes, a wisdom that didn't belong to an 8-year-old. Lisa exchanged a glance with Mark, her heart skipping a beat. "Sweetie, it's just the storm playing tricks on your ears. No one's out in this mess." She pulled him closer, wrapping the blanket around his shoulders. But Ethan didn't relax into her embrace. His body remained tense, his attention fixed on the unseen. Mark stood, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'll check the yard, make sure everything's secure. Maybe that'll ease his mind." He grabbed a raincoat from the hook by the door, ignoring Lisa's worried frown. "I'll be quick." As Mark stepped into the storm, the wind slammed against him, cold rain stinging his face. The backyard was a mess. Branches littered the grass, and the swing set creaked ominously. He shone his flashlight toward the woods, where the trees swayed, like dancers in a wild, chaotic rhythm. Nothing seemed out of place, yet Ethan's words echoed in his mind. Someone's scared out there. He shook his head, chalking it up to his son's overactive imagination, and hurried back inside. Back in the living room, Ethan had moved to the window, pressing his hands against the glass. "They're still crying," he whispered, his breath fogging the pain. Lisa knelt beside him, her heart aching at the distress in his voice. She didn't know what to make of his claims, but she knew her son. Ethan wasn't one for dramatics. If he felt something, it was real to him, and that was enough to make her listen. "Ethan, we're safe here," she said gently. "And tomorrow, when the storm's gone, we'll check everything, okay? Maybe it's just a fox or an owl caught in the wind." She hoped her words sounded convincing, but the doubt in her own voice betrayed her. Ethan nodded slowly, but his eyes never left the darkness beyond the window. As the storm raged on, the Thompson family huddled together, the lanterns casting long shadows across the room. Mark and Lisa held their son close, their love a quiet anchor against the chaos outside. But Ethan's heart was elsewhere, tethered to a distant cry only he could hear, a cry that would soon change their lives in ways they could never have imagined. The storm's fury lingered into the early hours, but by dawn, Willow Creek lay under a heavy, exhausted silence. The rain had softened to a drizzle, and the wind no longer howled but sighed, as if mourning the chaos it had wrought. Inside the Thompson home, the family had finally drifted into a restless sleep, curled together on the living room couch under a pile of blankets. Ethan, however, stirred just as the first grey light crept through the windows, his eyes blinking open with a purpose that belied his 8 years. He slipped out from under the blanket, careful not to wake his parents, and tiptoed to the back door. His small hand hesitated on the knob, Ethan's heart pounding with the same strange certainty that had kept him awake through the storm. The cry he'd heard, faint, desperate, and unmistakably real, still echoed in his mind. It wasn't human. He was sure of that now, but it was familiar, like a voice he'd known all his life. And then, in a flash of clarity, he knew who it was. "Rusty," he whispered, his breath catching. Rusty was the Thompson family's Labrador, retriever, a golden-furred companion with soulful brown eyes and a tail that wagged like a metronome. He'd been with them since Ethan was a toddler, a gift from Mark's father, who'd insisted every boy needed a dog. Rusty was more than a pet. He was Ethan's shadow, his confidant, the one who'd curl up beside him during thunderstorms, or nudge his hand when tears fell after a tough day. The dog had a knack for knowing when Ethan needed him, just as Ethan seemed to sense Rusty's moods, whether it was a playful bound toward the creek or a quiet sulk when his joints ached. But last night, as the storm approached, Rusty had been restless. Mark had let him out into the fenced backyard for a quick run, a routine the dog loved despite the weather. When the wind picked up, Mark called for him, but Rusty didn't come bounding back as usual. "Probably chasing a squirrel," Mark had said, securing the door against the growing gale. "He'll hunker down in his doghouse till it passes." Lisa had agreed, though her brow furrowed with worry. The doghouse was sturdy, built by Mark himself, and Rusty had weathered storms there before. Yet Ethan, watching from the window, had felt a pang of unease he couldn't explain. Now standing by the door, Ethan's certainty grew. Rusty wasn't in the doghouse. He was out there in the woods, hurting and scared. The cry Ethan had heard wasn't just a sound. It was a feeling, a sharp tug in his chest like a thread pulling him toward his friend. He glanced back at his sleeping parents, knowing they'd tell him to wait, to stay safe. But Rusty couldn't wait. Ethan grabbed his raincoat, slipped on his boots and eased the door open, stepping into the damp, debris-strewn morning. The backyard was a battlefield of broken branches and scattered leaves, the fence leaning precariously in one corner. Ethan's eyes scanned the familiar space, landing on the doghouse tucked against the shed. Its roof was intact, but the door was empty, no sign of Rusty's familiar golden form. Ethan's stomach twisted. He turned toward the woods, where the trees loomed like silent giants, their roots exposed by the storm's violence. The cry in his mind grew sharper, more urgent, guiding him like a beacon. "Rusty, I'm coming," Ethan whispered, clutching the flashlight he'd grabbed from the kitchen. He stepped over the low fence, his boots sinking into the muddy ground, and moved toward the tree line. The woods, usually a place of adventure where he and Rusty chased fireflies or hunted for arrowheads, now felt vast and foreboding. Fallen. Branches crisscrossed the path, and the air smelled of wet earth and splintered wood. Yet Ethan pressed on, driven by the connection he couldn't ignore. Deep in the woods, hidden beneath a massive oak that had succumbed to the storm's wrath, Rusty lay trapped. The tree had fallen at an angle, its thick trunk pinning the Labrador's hindquarters against the soft earth. A tangle of branches formed a cage around him, leaving just enough space to keep his head and chest free. His golden fur was matted with mud, and his breathing came in shallow, pained gasps. One hind leg was twisted unnaturally, and a low whimper escaped him, not loud enough to carry far, but piercing to Ethan's heightened senses. Rusty's intelligent eyes, usually bright with mischief, were clouded with pain, but they flickered with something else. Hope. He sensed Ethan, not through sound or sight, but through the same inexplicable bond that had always linked them. The dog's tail gave a weak thump against the ground, a silent plea for the boy who'd always understood him. Rusty had been more than a family dog. He'd been a protector, a listener, a partner in Ethan's quiet moments of wonder. Now, he needed Ethan to be his hero. Ethan moved faster, his flashlight beam darting across the wreckage of the storm. The cry in his mind was no longer just a sound, it was a picture, a flash of Rusty's golden fur, the weight of the tree, the cold mud beneath him. "Hold on, boy," Ethan called, his voice trembling but determined. He didn't know how he'd free Rusty or what he'd find, but he knew he had to try. The bond between them, unspoken but unbreakable, was a promise Ethan intended to keep. As he neared the spot where the oak had fallen, Ethan's heart raced. The woods were silent now, save for the drip of rain from leaves and the distant call of a morning bird. But to Ethan the air hummed with Rusty's presence, a heartbeat he could almost feel. He was close, so close. The boy who'd always felt the world a little deeper was about to discover just how deep that connection could run. Ethan's boots sank deeper into the muddy earth as he pushed through the storm-ravaged woods, his flashlight beam cutting through the morning mist. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and damp soil, but to Ethan it carried something more, a faint, tugging sensation, like a whisper in his chest. Rusty was close, and the cry Ethan had felt all night was now a vivid pulse guiding him with an urgency he couldn't ignore. His small frame trembled, not from the cold, but from the weight of what he knew. His best friend was in trouble, and somehow Ethan was the only one who could hear him. This wasn't the first time Ethan had felt something beyond the ordinary. Since he was little, he'd had moments that puzzled his parents and set him apart from other kids. At 4, he'd woken up crying, insisting their neighbor's rabbit was stuck and scared, only for Mark to find the animal trapped in a garden net the next morning. At 6, he'd refused to go near the creek one summer day, saying the water felt wrong. Hours later, a flash flood swept through, surprising everyone but Ethan. Lisa called it his big heart, a knack for noticing what others missed. Mark, more practical, wondered if it was just coincidence. But Ethan knew it was more, a connection to animals, a way of hearing their feelings, their fears as clearly as his own. Now, as he navigated the tangled woods, that connection burned brighter than ever. Rusty's cry wasn't just a sound in his mind. It was a flood of images and emotions, pain in a twisted leg, the weight of the tree, the cold seeping into fur. Ethan's breath hitched as he ducked under a fallen branch, his flashlight catching the glint of wet leaves. "I'm almost there, Rusty," he whispered, his voice steady despite the tears pricking his eyes. He didn't question how he knew where to go. It was as if Rusty's heart was a compass, and Ethan's was the needle pointing true. Back at the Thompson home, Lisa stirred on the couch, her arm still draped over the spot where Ethan had been. Her eyes fluttered open, and a jolt of panic shot through her when she saw the empty blanket. "Ethan?" she called, her voice sharp with alarm. She nudged Mark, who woke with a start, blinking in the dim light of the lanterns. "Mark, he's gone!" Mark scrambled to his feet, his heart racing. "He was right here," he said, scanning the room. His gaze landed on the back door, slightly ajar, and the raincoat missing from its hook. "The woods," he said, already pulling on his jacket. "He kept talking about someone crying out there." Lisa's face paled, but she grabbed her boots, her teacher's calm giving way to a mother's fear. "He's 8 years old, Mark. He can't be out in that mess alone." They stepped into the backyard, the drizzle soaking their clothes as they called Ethan's name. The storm's wreckage surrounded them, splintered branches, a toppled bird feeder, the doghouse eerily empty. Lisa's voice cracked as she shouted again, her eyes scanning the tree line. "He was so sure something was wrong," she said, clutching Mark's arm. "What if he's right? What if it's Rusty?" Mark hesitated, his practical side warring with the memory of Ethan's uncanny moments. "Rusty's probably just hiding somewhere," he said, but the words felt hollow. He'd seen Ethan's strange knack too many times to dismiss it entirely. "Let's find him before he gets hurt." They headed toward the woods, their flashlight beams darting across the muddy path, unaware that Ethan was already deep within, following a gift they didn't yet understand. In the woods, Ethan's steps slowed as the cry in his chest grew sharper, more precise. He stopped, his flashlight sweeping over a massive oak that lay uprooted, its gnarled roots clawing at the sky. Beneath it, in a small pocket of space, he saw a flash of golden fur. "Rusty!" he cried, dropping to his knees in the mud. The Labrador's head lifted weakly, his brown eyes meeting Ethan's with a mix of pain and relief. A soft whimper escaped him, and his tail gave a faint thump, as if to say, "You found me." Ethan crawled closer, ignoring the mud soaking his jeans. "It's okay, boy," he said, his voice trembling but firm. "I'm here now." He reached through the tangle of branches, his fingers brushing Rusty's matted fur. The dog licked his hand, a weak but warm gesture that made Ethan's heart swell. The images in his mind were clearer now, Rusty's leg pinned, the trees, weight pressing down, the fear of being alone. Ethan didn't know how he saw these things, but they were as real as the mud under his knees, as real as Rusty's trusting gaze. He sat back on his heels, wiping tears from his cheeks. "I need to get help," he said, more to himself than to Rusty. But the dog's eyes held him, and another wave of feeling washed over Ethan. Not words, but a plea to stay, to keep him calm. Ethan nodded, as if answering an unspoken question. "I won't leave you, I promise." He settled beside the tree, his small hand resting on Rusty's head, stroking gently. The pain in Rusty's leg seemed to ease under Ethan's touch, as if the boy's presence was a balm. Ethan's gift, though he didn't call it that, was more than intuition. It was a bridge between his heart and the animals he loved, a way of sharing their joys and fears. With Rusty, that bridge was stronger, built on years of quiet moments, chasing balls in the yard, napping together on lazy afternoons, Ethan whispering secrets to the dog who never judged. Now that bond was saving Rusty, keeping him anchored as Ethan's voice soothed his fear. In the distance, Mark and Lisa's calls grew louder, their flashlights slicing through the woods. Ethan heard them but didn't move, his focus on Rusty. He knew his parents would be angry, scared, maybe even confused, but he also knew they'd understand once they saw. Rusty wasn't just a dog, he was family, and Ethan's gift had led him here to this moment to keep that family whole. As the first beams of his parents' flashlights flickered through the trees, Ethan looked down at Rusty, a small smile breaking through his worry. "They're coming, boy," he whispered. "We're gonna get you out." Rusty's tail thumped again, weaker but hopeful, as if he believed every word. The dawn light filtered through Willow Creek's battered landscape, casting a pale glow over the storm's wreckage. Uprooted trees lay like fallen giants there, roots exposed to the sky, while power lines sagged across streets, sparking faintly in the drizzle. The town, usually alive with the hum of morning routines, was eerily still, its residents emerging cautiously to survey the damage. Roofs were stripped of shingles, fences toppled, and the creek that wound through the valley churned with muddy, swollen waters. Yet amidst the devastation, a quiet resilience stirred, neighbors calling to one another, offering help, already beginning the work of rebuilding. At the Thompson home, Mark and Lisa pushed through the woods, their flashlight, beams slicing through the mist. Ethan's name echoed in their desperate shouts, each unanswered call tightening the knot of fear in their chests. Lisa's boots slipped in the mud, but she pressed on, her teacher's composure shattered by the thought of her son alone in the storm's aftermath. "He's out here because of Rusty," she said, her voice trembling. He was so sure something was wrong. Mark nodded, his jaw tight. "If he's right about Rusty, we need to find them both." He didn't voice the fear that gripped him, Ethan, small and vulnerable, lost in the tangled, treacherous woods. But he clung to the memory of Ethan's strange certainty, the way his son had always seemed to know things others didn't. If Ethan had gone looking for Rusty, maybe that same instinct was keeping him safe. Deeper in the woods, Ethan sat beside the fallen oak, his hand never leaving Rusty's fur. The Labrador's breathing was steadier now, as if Ethan's presence alone was enough to dull his pain. The boy's raincoat was soaked, his curls plastered to his forehead, but he didn't notice the cold. His world had narrowed to Rusty, the dog's trusting eyes, the faint thump of his tail, the shared pulse of their bond. "They're almost here," Ethan whispered, sensing his parents' approach not through sound but through the same intuition that had led him to Rusty. He stroked the dog's head, murmuring, "You're going to be okay, boy. I promised." The issue. Beam of Mark's flashlight caught Ethan first, a small figure hunched in the mud, and relief flooded through him. "Ethan!" he shouted, breaking into a run. Lisa was right behind, her gasp audible as she saw her son safe. But as they reached him, their relief turned to shock. Beneath the massive oak, pinned in a cage of branches, lay Rusty, his golden fur streaked with dirt, his hind leg twisted at an unnatural angle. The dog's eyes flicked to Mark and Lisa, but he didn't move, as if all his strength was reserved for staying calm under Ethan's touch. "Ethan, thank God," Lisa cried, dropping to her knees and pulling him into a fierce hug. She checked him for injuries, her hands trembling as she brushed mud from his face. "What were you thinking, running off like that? You scared us to death." "I had to find Rusty," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. "He was calling me all night. He's hurt bad, but he's still here because I came." He looked at the dog, whose tail gave another weak thump as if agreeing. Mark crouched beside Rusty, his carpenter's hands hovering over the branches, assessing the situation. The tree was enormous, its trunk easily a ton, and the way it had, Fallan left little room to maneuver. "He's pinned tight," Mark said, his voice low. "We can't move this without help. Ethan, how did you even know he was here?" Ethan shrugged, the gesture small but heavy with meaning. "I just felt him. He showed me where he was like pictures in my head." He pointed to Rusty's leg. "It hurts a lot, and he's really cold. We need to get him out soon. Lisa." And Mark exchanged a look, the kind that parents share when their child says something impossible, yet undeniable. They'd seen Ethan's gift before, his uncanny knack for knowing when animals were in distress. But this was different. This was specific, vivid, and it had led their son straight to Rusty through a storm-torn forest. Lisa's heart ached, with a mix of awe and fear, but there was no time to dwell on it. "We need to get help," Mark said, standing. "Lisa, stay with Ethan. I'll run back and call the neighbors. We'll need tools, maybe a jack, and someone to get Dr. Patel." He squeezed Ethan's shoulder. "You did good, buddy, finding him. Now we're going to take care of Rusty, okay?" Ethan nodded, his hand still on Rusty's head. "Tell them to bring a shovel and a saw," he said, his voice calm but firm. "And be careful near his leg. There's a branch pressing on it." Mark hesitated, struck by the precision of Ethan's instructions. He didn't question it, though, not now, not when Rusty's life depended on it. He took off toward the house, his boots pounding the muddy path, while Lisa wrapped her arms around Ethan, shielding him from the drizzle. "You're so brave," she whispered, kissing his forehead. "But don't ever scare us like that again." "I had to," Ethan said simply, his eyes on Rusty. He was waiting for me. As Mark reached the house, he found neighbors already gathering in the street, assessing their own storm damage. Tom Bradley, a burly mechanic from down the road, waved him over. "You folks okay, Mark? Looks like a war zone out here." We're fine, but Rusty's trapped in the woods, Mark said, breathless. Ethan found him under a fallen tree. We need help. Tools, anything you've got. And someone call Dr. Patel. Tom's eyes widened, but he didn't hesitate. I've got a chainsaw and a floor jack in my garage. Let's round up some folks. Within minutes, a small group formed. Mrs. Henderson with her gardening tools, young Mike Chen with a pickaxe, and others offering muscle and support. Word of Ethan's discovery spread, and curious glances followed Mark as he led the group back to the woods. The town's collective spirit, bruised but unbroken by the storm, rallied around the Thompsons. Willow Creek was a place where people showed up, whether for a barn raising or a lost dog, and today was no exception. But as they trudged toward the woods, Mark couldn't shake Ethan's words. He showed me where he was, like pictures in my head. What did it mean for their son? This gift that seemed to grow stronger with every passing moment. Ethan knelt in the mud beside Rusty, his small hand steady on the Labrador's head as the drizzle continued to fall. The woods around them were a maze of splintered branches and uprooted trees, but Ethan's world was anchored to the golden-furred dog trapped beneath the massive oak. Rusty's brown eyes, clouded with pain, held a quiet trust that fueled Ethan's resolve. The boy's raincoat was soaked through, his knees caked with dirt, but he didn't waver. Rusty needed him, and Ethan's heart burned with a determination that seemed far beyond his 8 years. Lisa sat beside him, her arm around his shoulders, shielding him from the damp chill. She whispered reassurances, her voice a soft tether, to keep Ethan grounded, but her eyes betrayed her worry. Ethan's words echoed in her mind. He showed me where he was, like pictures in my head, and the weight of his gift pressed against her. She'd always known her son was special, his empathy for animals a light that shone brighter than most. But this was different, a connection so vivid it had driven him into a storm-torn forest alone. She tightened her grip on him, torn between pride and fear. "Dad's bringing help," Lisa said, brushing a wet curl from Ethan's forehead. "Rusty's going to be okay, sweetheart. You found him, and that's what matters." She glanced at the dog, whose breathing was shallow but steady, as if Ethan's presence alone was keeping him anchored. Ethan nodded, but his gaze never left. "Rusty. He's trying so hard to be brave," he said softly, "but he's scared it's too heavy." His fingers traced gentle circles behind Rusty's ears, and the dog let out a faint whimper, his tail giving a weak thump. The images in Ethan's mind were sharp now. Rusty's leg pinned by a jagged branch, the cold seeping into his body, the faint hope sparked by Ethan's arrival. Ethan didn't know how he saw these things, but they were as real as the mud under his boots, and they fueled his determination to stay by Rusty's side. "I'm not leaving you," Ethan whispered, his voice fierce with promise, no matter what. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching Rusty's, and murmured words too soft for Lisa to hear. The dog's eyes flickered, as if drawing strength from the boy's unwavering presence. Ethan's connection to Rusty wasn't just a feeling, it was a lifeline, a shared thread of courage that held them both steady. Back at the edge of the woods, Mark led the group of neighbors, their tools clinking as they navigated the muddy path. Tom Bradley carried a chainsaw, its weight balanced on his shoulder, while Mike Chen gripped a pickaxe, his young face set with determination. Mrs. Henderson, a spry retiree known for her prize roses, clutched a shovel, her eyes bright with purpose. Others followed, their voices a low hum of concern and resolve. The storm had battered Willow Creek, but it had also woven its people tighter, and the thought of a boy and his dog in need was enough to spur them into action. "Ethan's with him now?" Tom asked, stepping over a fallen branch. "Kids. Got guts running out here alone." Mark nodded, his jaw tight. He knew Rusty was trapped before we even realized the dog was missing. Don't ask me how. He just did. He didn't elaborate, unsure how to explain Ethan's gift to neighbors who knew him as the quiet kid with a knack for finding lost pets. But the urgency in his voice was enough, and the group quickened their pace. As they neared the fallen oak, Lisa's flashlight beam caught their approach, and she stood waving them over. "Over here," she called, her voice cutting through the morning mist. Ethan looked up, relief flashing across his face, but he didn't move from Rusty's side. The sight of the trapped Labrador, his golden fur matted and his leg pinned, drew gasps from the group. Mrs. Henderson covered her mouth and Mike muttered, "Poor guy." Mark knelt beside Ethan, his hand on his son's shoulder. "You did good, buddy. We're going to get Rusty out now." He studied the tree, its massive trunk a daunting obstacle, and turned to the group. "We'll need to clear some branches first, then figure out how to lift this thing. Tom, can your jack handle that weight?" Tom crouched, eyeing the setup. "Maybe if we dig out some space first, but we gotta be careful. Don't want to shift anything and hurt him worse." He glanced at Ethan, who was watching intently. "Kid, you got any ideas where we should start?" Ethan's eyes narrowed, as if listening to something only he could hear. "Start digging on the left side," he said, pointing to a spot near Rusty's hindquarters. "There's a branch pressing on his leg there. If you cut it, it'll help, but don't touch the big one on the right, it's holding the tree up." His voice was calm, almost authoritative, and the adults exchanged startled glances. Lisa's breath caught, but she didn't interrupt. Ethan's instructions were so specific, so confident, that they carried a weight no 8-year-olds should. Mark nodded slowly, trusting his son's instinct despite the questions swirling in his mind. "You heard him," he said to the group. "Let's get to work." Tom fired up the chainsaw, its roar breaking the morning's quiet. While Mike and Mrs. Henderson began digging with their tools, Ethan stayed by Rusty, his hand never leaving the dog's fur, his presence a steady anchor. "They're gonna help you," he whispered, his voice a lifeline for the Labrador. Rusty's eyes, though heavy with pain, stayed fixed on Ethan, as if drawing courage from the boy's determination. Lisa watched her son, her heart swelling with a mix of awe and protectiveness. Ethan's gift, whatever it was, had led him here, and now it was guiding the rescue. She didn't understand it, but she saw the truth in Rusty's calm, in the way Ethan's touch seemed to ease the dog's fear. Her boy was more than brave. He was resolute, driven by a bond that defied explanation, and she knew he wouldn't rest until Rusty was free. As the neighbors worked, their movements careful but urgent, Ethan's determination became the heartbeat of the rescue. He was a child, yes, but in this moment, he was something more. A beacon of hope for a dog who'd never given up, and a mystery that Willow Creek was only beginning to unravel. The woods around the fallen oak buzzed with purpose, as Willow Creek's neighbors worked in unison, their tools scraping and slicing through the storm's debris. The chainsaw's growl, wielded by Tom Bradley, cut through smaller branches, while Mike Chen and Mrs. Henderson shoveled mud to clear space around Rusty's pinned form. The Labrador, still trapped beneath the massive trunk, lay quiet, his golden fur streaked with dirt, his eyes fixed on Ethan. The 8-year-old boy remained steadfast at his side, his small hand stroking Rusty's head, his voice a soft murmur of comfort that seemed to hold the dog's pain at bay. Lisa stood close, her arms crossed tightly against the morning chill, her eyes darting between Ethan and the rescue effort. The sight of her son, so young, yet so resolute, stirred a storm of emotions within her. She'd always known Ethan was different, his empathy for animals a quiet gift that set him apart. But this moment, with Ethan guiding grown adults with uncanny precision, was a revelation. His earlier words, "He showed me where he was, like pictures in my head," echoed in her mind, no longer just a child's fancy, but a truth she could no longer dismiss. Her heart ached with pride, but also with a mother's fear. What did this gift mean for her son, and how could she protect him when it led him into danger? Mark, directing the group with a carpenter's eye, felt the same weight. He glanced at Ethan, who had just pointed to a specific spot, and said, "Dig there, but go slow. There's a root touching his side, and it hurts." Mike had followed the instruction without question, and sure enough, a gnarled root emerged exactly where Ethan indicated. Mark's practical nature struggled to make sense of it. How could his son know these things? Yet the evidence was undeniable. Ethan's directions were saving Rusty from further harm, and the neighbors were looking to him with a mix of awe and trust. "Mark, your kid's something else," Tom said, pausing to wipe sweat from his brow despite the cool air. He nodded toward Ethan, who was now instructing Mrs. Henderson to dampen a cloth with water from a bottle to cool Rusty's face. "He's calling the shots, like he's done this before." Mark managed a tight smile, his throat thick. Yeah, he's special. The word felt inadequate, but it was all he could muster. He met Lisa's gaze, and in that silent exchange they shared a realization. Ethan's gift wasn't just a quirk or a coincidence. It was real, powerful, and it had brought them here, to this moment, to save a dog who was family. The weight of that truth settled over them, both a blessing and a responsibility they weren't sure how to carry. The community's response was immediate and heartfelt, a reflection of Willow Creek's tight-knit spirit. As word spread through the group, more neighbors arrived, drawn by the story of the boy who'd found his trapped dog. Mrs. Carter, a retired school bus driver with a knack for organizing, brought blankets and a thermos of hot coffee. Young Sarah Lopez, who ran the local bakery, showed up with a bag of sandwiches, her eyes wide at the sight of Ethan's calm focus. Even old Mr. Peterson, hobbling with his cane, stood at the edge of the group muttering, "That boy's got a gift, mark my words." "Ethan, how'd you know Rusty was out here?" Sarah asked, kneeling beside him to offer a sandwich. She kept her tone light, but her curiosity was plain. Ethan didn't look up from Rusty, his hand still stroking the dog's fur. "He told me," he said simply. "He was scared and hurt, and I saw where he was." Like a map in my head, he pointed to a spot near Rusty's hind leg. "Be careful there, Tom. There's a sharp stick under the mud." Tom, mid-swing with the chainsaw, paused and adjusted his angle, digging carefully with a shovel instead. Sure enough, a jagged stick emerged, inches from Rusty's leg. The group fell silent for a moment, the weight of Ethan's words sinking in. Sarah's jaw dropped, and she glanced at Lisa, who could only offer a helpless shrug. The neighbors exchanged looks, some skeptical, others wondering if they'd witnessed something extraordinary. Mrs. Carter stepped forward, her voice firm but kind. "Let's keep moving, folks. This dog needs us, and Ethan's giving us a head start." Her words spurred the group back into action, but the air hummed with unspoken questions. Willow Creek was a practical town, grounded in hard work and common sense. But Ethan's gift was like a spark, igniting curiosity and a flicker of wonder. Lisa moved closer to Mark, her voice low. "He's not just guessing, Mark. He knows." "How are we supposed to handle this?" Her eyes were wet, not from the drizzle, but from the overwhelming love and fear for her son. Mark took her hand, squeezing it tightly. "I don't know, Lisa, but he's saving Rusty right now, and that's enough for me. We'll figure out the rest later." He looked at Ethan, whose muddy face was set with a determination that made him seem older, wiser, as if he carried a purpose they were only beginning to glimpse. Dr. Patel, the town's veterinarian, arrived just as the group cleared enough branches to expose more of Rusty's trapped form. A wiry woman with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor, she knelt beside the dog, her medical bag open. "Ethan, you've done an incredible job keeping him calm," she said, her voice steady but warm. "Can you tell me what you're feeling from him now?" Ethan's brow furrowed as if listening to a distant voice. "His leg hurts the most, but his side's sore too, where the root was. He's really tired, but he's trying to stay awake for me." He looked at Dr. Patel with those deep, knowing eyes. "He trusts you, but he's scared of the needles." Dr. Patel's eyebrows rose, but she nodded, pulling out a syringe with practiced ease. "Thank you, Ethan. I'll be gentle." She worked quickly, administering a painkiller while Ethan whispered to Rusty, keeping the dog's gaze locked on his. To everyone's amazement, Rusty didn't flinch, his body relaxing under Ethan's soothing presence. The community's efforts, guided by Ethan's uncanny insights, were knitting together a rescue that felt like a small miracle. Neighbors who'd come to help a trapped dog were now witnesses to something bigger, a boy whose heart seemed to speak to animals, and a town, ready to rally behind him. As the group dug deeper, their tools moving with careful precision, Mark and Lisa stood together, their realization dawning. Their son was extraordinary, and this moment was only the beginning. The woods pulsed with the rhythm of Willow Creek's collective effort, a symphony of shovels scraping, chainsaws humming, and voices coordinating in quiet urgency. The massive oak that pinned Rusty loomed like a fallen titan, its weight a daunting challenge, but the neighbors worked with a shared purpose, their hands moving as if guided by Ethan's unwavering determination. The 8-year-old boy remained, at Rusty's side, his muddy hand never leaving the Labrador's golden fur, his voice a steady murmur that seemed to anchor the dog through his pain. The morning mist had burned off, and the sun peeked through the trees, casting dappled light on the scene, a beacon of hope in the storm's aftermath. Mark took charge, his carpenter's instincts mapping out the rescue. "We need to create a tunnel under the trunk to free his legs," he said, pointing to the spot Ethan had indicated. "Tom, keep clearing those branches. Mike, Mrs. Henderson, dig here, but go slow. Ethan says there's a route we can't shift." His voice carried a new weight, shaped by the realization that his son's instructions weren't guesses but truths, delivered with a precision that defied explanation. Tom nodded, adjusting the chainsaw to slice through a tangle of smaller branches, while Mike and Mrs. Henderson shoveled carefully, their movements guided by Ethan's earlier warning about the route. Dr. Patel knelt beside Rusty, monitoring his vitals with a stethoscope, her calm professionalism a steadying force. "He's stable for now," she said, glancing at Ethan. "Your presence is keeping his stress down, Ethan. Keep talking to him." Ethan's eyes were fixed on Rusty, his small face etched with focus. "You're doing great, boy," he whispered, his fingers tracing gentle circles behind the dog's ears. "They're almost there, just hold on." Rusty's breathing hitched, but his eyes stayed locked on Ethan's, as if drawing strength from the boy's words. The images in Ethan's mind were vivid, Rusty's leg pinned by a splintered branch, the pressure on his side easing as the route was cleared. "Dr. Patel," Ethan said suddenly, his legs bleeding a little under the mud. "You need to check it." Dr. Patel's eyebrows rose, but she didn't hesitate, gently probing the area Ethan indicated. Sure enough, a small gash oozed blood, hidden by the caked dirt. "Good catch, Ethan," she said, cleaning the wound and applying a temporary bandage. "How did you know?" "He showed me," Ethan said simply, his voice soft but certain. The adults exchanged glances, their skepticism fading with each of Ethan's accurate directions. Lisa, standing close, felt a shiver run through her, not from the damp air but from the growing certainty that her son's gift was something extraordinary, a bridge between him and Rusty that no one else could cross. The rescue effort intensified. As more neighbors joined, their tools and hands adding to the momentum, Mrs. Carter organized a rotation, ensuring fresh diggers replaced tired ones, while Sarah Lopez passed out water bottles and sandwiches to keep everyone fueled. Mr. Peterson, leaning on his cane, offered quiet encouragement, his weathered voice carrying stories of past Willow Creek rescues. The community spirit, forged in the storm's crucible, shone through, each person a thread in the tapestry of care woven around Ethan and Rusty. "Ethan, tell us where to focus next," Mark said, wiping sweat from his brow. He'd stopped questioning his son's insights, trusting them as he would a blueprint. Ethan's brow furrowed as if listening to a silent voice. Then he pointed to a spot near Rusty's hindquarters. "There's a big branch under the trunk." Pressing on his hip, "If you cut it, it'll give you room to lift the tree a little." Tom adjusted his chainsaw, following Ethan's direction with surgical precision. The blade bit into the wood, and within minutes, a thick branch was freed, creating a small gap beneath the trunk. Mike slid a floorjack into the space, pumping it slowly to test the tree's weight. The oak creaked but held, and Rusty let out a soft whimper, his body tensing. Ethan's hand tightened on the dog's fur. "It's okay, Rusty. They're being careful." Dr. Patel watched closely, her hands ready with medical supplies. "If we can lift the trunk just a few inches, I can slide a blanket under him to pull him out," she said. "But we need to go slow. Any sudden shift could worsen his injuries." She looked at Ethan. "Can you tell if he's in more pain now?" Ethan closed his eyes, his face still as if reaching for Rusty's feelings. "It hurts when the tree moves, but he's trying to stay still. He says it's better now that the branch is gone." The dog's tail gave a faint thump, as if confirming Ethan's words, and Dr. Patel shook her head in quiet amazement. Lisa moved to Ethan's side, her hand resting on his shoulder. "You're doing so much for him, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'm so proud of you." Her voice trembled, not just with love, but with the dawning understanding that Ethan's gift was shaping this rescue. She caught Mark's eye, and He gave a small nod, their shared realization deepening. Their son was not just helping Rusty, he was leading them all. The jack creaked as Mike pumped it higher, the trunk lifting imperceptibly. Mark and Tom braced the tree with wooden beams, ensuring stability, while Mrs. Henderson shoveled away loose dirt to widen the tunnel. Ethan's directions continued, each one precise. "Stop lifting now. It's pressing on his back." "Dig! A little more on the left. There's a rock." Each instruction was followed, and each time the group found exactly what Ethan described: a rock, a hidden branch, a safe path forward. As the sun climbed higher, the rescue took shape, a testament to Willow Creek's unity and Ethan's extraordinary guidance. Neighbors who'd come to lend a hand now worked with reverence, their movements careful, their voices hushed. Sarah Lopez whispered to Mrs. Carter, "It's like he's talking to Rusty's soul." Mrs. Carter nodded, her eyes on Ethan. "That boy's got something special. This town's lucky to have him." Dr. Patel prepared a stretcher, ready to slide it under Rusty once the trunk was high enough. "We're close," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "Ethan, keep him calm. We're almost there." Ethan nodded, his hand never leaving Rusty, his determination a quiet force that held the rescue together. The Labrador's eyes, though heavy with exhaustion, shone with trust, as if he knew Ethan would keep his promise to set him free. The community's effort, fueled by Ethan's gift, was a heartwarming dance of hope and action, each person playing their part in a miracle unfolding in the woods. As the jack lifted the trunk another inch, Rusty's breathing steadied, and Ethan's small smile broke through the mud on his face, a sign that they were winning together. The air in the Willow Creek woods was thick with the scent of wet earth and sawdust, the rescue effort reaching a critical moment. The massive oak creaked as Mike pumped the floor jack, lifting the trunk just enough to create a narrow tunnel beneath her. Rusty, the golden Labrador pinned for hours, lay still, his breathing shallow but steady, anchored by Ethan's unwavering presence. The 8-year-old boy knelt in the mud, his hand resting on Rusty's head, his quiet whispers a lifeline that kept the dog calm. The neighbors worked with practiced precision, their tools moving in harmony, guided by Ethan's uncanny directions. But as the rescue neared its climax, a deeper truth began to surface, one that would bind the Thompson family and their community in a moment of profound revelation. Dr. Patel, poised with a stretcher and medical supplies, signaled to Mark. "We're ready to pull him out," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "Ethan, keep him steady. We'll slide the blanket under him slowly." Ethan nodded, his dark eyes focused on Rusty, his fingers tracing soothing patterns in the dog's fur. "You're almost free, boy," he murmured. "Just a little longer." Rusty's tail gave a faint thump, his trust in Ethan palpable, a silent testament to their bond. Lisa stood close, her hands clasped tightly, her heart pounding with a mix of hope and fear. Ethan's gift had led them here, his instructions saving Rusty from further harm, but each precise direction deepened the mystery of what her son could do. She watched as Mark and Tom braced the tree, ensuring the jack held, while Mrs. Henderson and Mike cleared the last of the debris from the tunnel. The community's effort was a heartwarming tapestry, but it was Ethan, small, muddy, and resolute, who wove it together, his gift a beacon in the chaos. As Dr. Patel carefully slid the blanket under Rusty's body, Ethan's voice broke the tense silence. "He's remembering something," he said softly, his brow furrowing as if seeing a distant scene. "A long time ago, when he was younger, there was ice and a little kid who fell through. Rusty pulled him out." He looked up at his parents, his eyes wide with wonder. "He saved a boy by the creek, didn't he?" Lisa's breath caught, and Mark froze, his hands still on the wooden beam. The neighbors paused, their tools falling silent, as the weight of Ethan's words settled over them. Lisa's voice trembled as she knelt beside her son. "Ethan, how do you know that?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "Rusty showed me," Ethan said, his voice steady but tinged with awe. "It's like a picture in my head. The water was so cold, and the boy was scared, but Rusty grabbed his coat and had dragged him to the bank. He was so proud. He stroked Rusty's fur, and the dog let out a soft whine as if confirming the memory. Mark exchanged a stunned look with Lisa, his practical mind grappling with the impossible. That was 5 years ago, he said, his voice low. Before Ethan was even old enough to remember. Rusty was just a young dog then, barely trained. A kid from the next town fell through the ice on Willow Creek. Rusty was out with my dad and he just acted, pulled the boy out before anyone could get there. It was in the local paper, but we never told Ethan. Lisa's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. We didn't want to scare him with stories about the creek, she whispered. He was only 3. She looked at Ethan, who was watching Rusty with a quiet intensity, as if the dog's memory was his own. The realization hit her like a wave. Ethan's gift wasn't just about sensing pain or fear. It was about sharing stories, memories, the very essence of the animals he loved. Rusty had shared a piece of his past, a heroic moment, and Ethan had seen it as clearly as if he'd been there. The neighbors stood in hushed awe, their skepticism melting into wonder. Mrs. Carter, her thermos still in hand, shook her head. That boy's got something divine in him, she murmured. Sarah Lopez, wiping her eyes, nodded. It's like Rusty's talking to him, telling him who he is. Even Mr. Peterson, leaning on his cane, muttered, Never seen anything like it in all my years. Dr. Patel, ever professional, kept her focus on the rescue but couldn't hide her amazement. Ethan, you're helping us more than you know, she said, securing the blanket around Rusty's torso. We're going to pull him out now. Tell us if he's in pain. Ethan nodded, closing his eyes as if tuning into Rusty's feelings. He's ready, he said, but go slow. His leg's really sore. Mark and Tom took hold of the blanket's edges, their movements deliberate, while Mike steadied the jack. On Dr. Patel's count, they pulled gently, inching Rusty's body free from the tree's grip. The dog whimpered, his body trembling, but Ethan's voice was there, steady and soothing. You're doing great, Rusty. You're almost out. The Labrador's eyes stayed on Ethan, his trust unwavering, and with a final careful tug he was free. The group let out a collective breath, a ripple of relief and joy spreading through them. Dr. Patel quickly assessed Rusty, checking his leg and vitals, while Ethan stayed close, his hand on the dog's flank. He's hurting, but he's so happy, Ethan said, a small smile breaking through the mud on his face. He knew I'd find him. Lisa pulled Ethan into a tight hug, tears streaming down her cheeks. You're incredible, sweetheart, she said, her voice breaking. You saved him. Mark joined them, his arm around both, his own eyes glistening. The neighbors gathered closer, their faces alight with pride and wonder, their hands reaching out to pat Ethan's shoulder or offer quiet words of praise. The emotional revelation of Ethan's gift, of Rusty's shared memory, wove a deeper bond between the Thompsons and their community. Willow Creek, battered by the storm, found healing in this moment, in the boy who heard what no one else could, and the dog who'd trusted him to listen. As Dr. Patel prepared Rusty for transport to her clinic, the neighbors stood together, their hearts full, knowing they'd witnessed something extraordinary. The sun climbed higher over Willow Creek, its rays filtering through the trees to warm the muddy clearing where Rusty's rescue had unfolded. The Labrador, now freed from the fallen oak, lay on Dr. Patel's stretcher, his golden fur matted but his eyes brighter, as if Ethan's presence had rekindled a spark within him. The 8-year-old boy walked beside the stretcher, his hand resting lightly on Rusty's flank, his quiet murmurs a steady comfort. The neighbors, their tools now still, followed in a procession back to the Thompson home, their faces glowing with the shared triumph of the morning. For Ethan, though, the work wasn't over. His bond with Rusty was about to take on a new role, one that would deepen their connection and captivate the town. Dr. Patel's veterinary clinic, a small brick building on the edge of Willow Creek, became Rusty's temporary home. The Labrador's injuries were serious, a fractured hind leg, deep bruising and dehydration from hours under the tree, but Dr. Patel's skilled hands and calm demeanor gave hope. He's a fighter, she told Mark and Lisa as she settled Rusty into a padded recovery kennel, an IV line delivering fluids. But he'll need time and care. That leg will take weeks to heal, and we'll need to watch for infection. Ethan, standing by the kennel, listened intently, his eyes never leaving Rusty. "He's tired, but he's not scared anymore," he said softly, his fingers slipping through the bars to touch the dog's fur. "He says the medicine's making him feel warm." Rusty's tail gave a slow wag, and he licked Ethan's hand, a gesture that made Dr. Patel pause, her clipboard forgotten. "Ethan, that's remarkable," she said, her scientific mind wrestling with the boy's uncanny insight. "His temperature's stabilizing, which could feel like warmth to him. How do you know these things?" Ethan shrugged, his muddy curls bouncing, as if the question was as simple as asking why the sky was blue. "He just tells me. Not with words, but with feelings, like pictures." Lisa, standing behind Ethan, squeezed Mark's hand, her heart swelling with a mix of awe and protectiveness. The revelation in the woods, Ethan's vision of Rusty's heroic past, had shifted something in her. She no longer saw her son's gift as a quirk to be gently managed. It was a profound connection, one that had saved Rusty and was now guiding his recovery. Mark, his practical nature softening, nodded silently, his own acceptance growing. There, boy was extraordinary, and Rusty's survival was proof. Over the next days, Ethan became a fixture at the clinic, visiting after school with a determination that left the staff in quiet admiration. Dr. Patel, recognizing the effect of Ethan's presence, made special accommodations, allowing him to sit by Rusty's kennel for hours. The Labrador's recovery was nothing short of astonishing. His vitals improved markedly when Ethan was near, his heart rate steadying, his pain indicators dropping. Dr. Patel began documenting the case, her notes detailing how Rusty ate more readily when Ethan offered food, how he relaxed under the boy's touch during bandage changes. "Ethan, can you tell if he's comfortable now?" Dr. Patel asked one afternoon, adjusting Rusty's leg splint. Ethan closed his eyes, his hand on Rusty's head, and nodded. "He says the splint feels tight, but it's better than yesterday. His leg doesn't burn as much." Dr. Patel checked the splint, finding slight swelling that confirmed Ethan's observation. She made a small adjustment, and Rusty let out a soft sigh, his eyes half closing in relief. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Patel confided to Mark and Lisa during a quiet moment. "I've seen animals respond to familiar voices, but this? Ethan's insights are guiding our treatment. His leg's healing faster than I'd expect, and I can't help but think it's because of your son." She hesitated, her scientific rigor warring with wonder. "I'd like to share this with a veterinary journal, with your permission. It could help us understand human-animal bonds better." Lisa hesitated, her protective instincts flaring. "We don't want Ethan treated like a lab subject," she said firmly. Mark nodded in agreement, but added, "If it helps animals and keeps Ethan safe, we'll consider it. But he's just a kid." Dr. Patel nodded, respecting their caution, and turned her focus back to Rusty, who was now licking Ethan's fingers through the kennel bars. At home, Ethan's role in Rusty's recovery became a quiet ritual. He'd rush through his homework, then beg to be driven to the clinic, his backpack stuffed with books to read aloud to Rusty. The dog, in turn, seemed to wait for him, his ears pricking at the sound of Ethan's voice in the hallway. Neighbors, hearing of Rusty's progress, stopped by with treats for Ethan and get-well cards for the dog, their admiration for the boy growing with each story. Mrs. Henderson, dropping off a batch of cookies, told Lisa, "That boy of yours is a blessing. Rusty's lucky to have him." Ethan, though, saw it differently. "Rusty's helping me too," he told his parents one evening, his voice earnest. "He's showing me how to be brave, like when he saved that boy in the creek." Lisa's eyes welled up, and Mark ruffled Ethan's curls, their pride tempered by the weight of their son's gift. Rusty's recovery wasn't just physical. It was a testament to the bond that had saved him, a bond that Ethan nurtured with every visit, every whispered promise. The clinic staff grew accustomed to Ethan's presence, their initial curiosity turning to respect. One nurse, catching Ethan reading to Rusty, whispered to Dr. Patel, "It's like they're healing each other." And indeed, Ethan's own confidence grew, his quiet nature blooming into a gentle strength. He'd tell Rusty about his day, about the birds he'd seen or the math test he'd aced, and Rusty would listen, his eyes bright, as if every word mattered. As Rusty's leg mended, the town began to see Ethan and his dog as more than a heartwarming story. They were a symbol of hope, a reminder of what love and connection could do. Ethan's role in Rusty's recovery was a quiet miracle, one that deepened his family's trust in his gift and set the stage for a future neither they nor Willow Creek could yet imagine. 2 weeks into Rusty's recovery, Willow Creek buzzed with the quiet hum of renewal. The storm's scars, toppled fences, patched roofs were fading, replaced by the town's resilient spirit. At Dr. Patel's clinic, Rusty's progress was a small miracle, his fractured leg healing faster than expected, his strength returning with each day. Ethan, the 8-year-old who'd become the Labrador's lifeline, was there every afternoon, his presence a catalyst for the dog's recovery. But as Rusty grew stronger, a new chapter was unfolding for both boy and dog, one that would give their extraordinary bond a purpose far beyond the woods where it had been forged. Ethan sat cross-legged by Rusty's kennel, reading aloud from a tattered copy of Charlotte's Web, his voice soft but clear. Rusty, his golden fur regaining its sheen, lay with his head resting on his paws, his eyes fixed on Ethan with an attentiveness that seemed almost human. The clinic staff had grown used to this ritual, their initial amazement settling into a quiet respect for the boy whose gift defied explanation. Dr. Patel, updating Rusty's chart, paused to listen, her pen still as Ethan's words filled the room. "He's doing so well because of you," she told him, her voice warm. "I've never seen a recovery like this." Ethan looked up, his curls falling into his eyes. "He says he's ready to move more," he said, his tone matter of fact. "His leg feels stronger, but it's still stiff." Rusty's tail thumped as if in agreement, and Dr. Patel's eyebrows rose. She checked the dog's splint, noting the reduced swelling, and made a note to schedule a new X-ray. "You're right, Ethan," she said. "We'll start some light physical therapy soon. Your instincts are spot on." At home, Mark and Lisa marveled at the changes in their son. Ethan's quiet nature had blossomed into a gentle confidence, his bond with Rusty giving him a sense of purpose. Yet they worried about the weight of his gift. "He's only 8, Lisa said one evening, stirring a pot of soup in their cozy kitchen. "What if this ability keeps pulling him into dangerous situations? He ran into the woods alone, Mark." Her voice trembled, the memory of that morning still raw. Mark, sanding a wooden chair at the table, nodded slowly. "I know, but you saw him with Rusty. How sure he was, how he saved him. We can't ignore what he can do." He set down the sandpaper, meeting her eyes. "Maybe we need to guide it, not hold it back. Find a way for him to use it safely." Lisa sighed, her love for Ethan warring with her fear, but she knew Mark was right. Their son's gift was a part of him, as natural as his smile, and it was leading him somewhere they couldn't yet see. The turning point came with the arrival of Mrs. Eleanor Carter, a retired search and rescue trainer who'd heard of Ethan and Rusty's story through Willow Creek's grapevine. A wiry woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, she knocked on the Thompsons' door one crisp afternoon, her silver braids swinging as she introduced herself. "I trained dogs for the county team back in the day," she said, sipping coffee at their kitchen table. "Heard about your boy and his dog. Thought I'd see if the rumors were true." Ethan, home from school, sat quietly, listening as Mrs. Carter spoke. Rusty, now allowed short visits home, lay at his feet, his splint clunky but his spirit bright. "What rumors?" Ethan asked, his voice curious but guarded. Mrs. Carter's eyes softened. "That you found Rusty when no one else could. That you knew exactly where he was hurt. Folks say you've got away with animals, Ethan. And Rusty, well, I looked into his history. Did you know he was a search and rescue dog before your family got him?" Mark and Lisa exchanged a startled glance. "We didn't," Mark said. "My dad got him from a friend when he was a pup. We knew he was smart, but—" He trailed off, thinking of Ethan's vision of Rusty saving a boy from the icy creek. Mrs. Carter nodded. "Rusty was trained by a handler who moved away. He was young, still learning, but he had the instincts. That story about the creek, that was him acting on his training. And now with you, Ethan, it's like he's found his partner again." She leaned forward, her voice earnest. I think you two could do something special together. Help people. Find those who are lost. With proper training, of course, and... Your parents' approval. Ethan's eyes widened, a spark of excitement igniting. Like finding people in the woods? Or after storms? Rusty's ears pricked, and he nudged Ethan's hand, as if eager for the idea. Ethan's smile grew, the first unguarded one Lisa had seen in days. Lisa's heart skipped, her protective instincts flaring. He's so young, Mrs. Carter, and Rusty's still healing. Isn't that dangerous? Absolutely, Mrs. Carter said, her tone serious. I'd never put a child in harm's way. Training would start slow, basic commands, scent work, all under supervision. Ethan wouldn't go near real searchers until he's older, and even then only with you there. Rusty's skills are too valuable to waste, and Ethan's, well, let's call it a gift. Together they could save lives. Mark ran a hand through his hair, processing the proposal. What would it involve? For Ethan, I mean. We don't know anything about search and rescue. I'd teach you, Mrs. Carter said. I've got contacts with the county team. We'd start with Rusty's rehabilitation, refresh his training, and teach Ethan how to work with him. It's a commitment, but I've seen what a good team can do. And after what? Ethan did in the woods. I'd bet my old boots he's a natural. Ethan looked at his parents, his eyes pleading. Can we, Mom? Dad, Rusty wants to help people again. He told me he misses it. Rusty's tail thumped, and he rested his head on Ethan's knee, as if sealing the plea. Lisa's throat tightened. But she saw the fire in Ethan's eyes, the same determination that had led him to Rusty. Mark squeezed her hand under the table, a silent agreement forming. We'll need to talk it over, he said to Mrs. Carter, but if it's safe, and it's what Ethan wants. He looked at his son, pride swelling. We'll consider it. Mrs. Carter smiled, sensing their cautious openness. Take your time. But I'll tell you this. Rusty and Ethan were meant to find each other. This isn't just about saving a dog. It's about giving them both a purpose. She stood, leaving her card on the table. Call me when you're ready. That night, as Ethan lay in bed with Rusty curled beside him, he whispered, We're going to do big things, boy, like you did before. Rusty's soft whine was answer enough, their bond a promise of a new path ahead, a purpose that would light up Willow Creek and beyond. 3 months after the storm that shook Willow Creek, the town had stitched itself back together, its streets bustling again with the rhythm of daily life. Rusty, the golden Labrador who'd been trapped under a fallen oak, was nearly fully recovered, his fractured leg now strong enough for short walks, his spirit as vibrant as ever. Ethan, the 8-year-old whose gift had saved him, had grown, too, not in height but in purpose. Under Mrs. Carter's careful guidance, boy and dog had begun training as a search and rescue team, their bond honed through hours of scent games, obedience drills, and Ethan's uncanny ability to sense Rusty's instincts. Their first real test, however, came sooner than anyone expected, thrusting them into a mission that would solidify their new calling. It was a crisp October afternoon when the call came. A hiker, a college student named Jenna, had gone missing. In the hills beyond Willow Creek, her phone's last signal pinging near a rocky trail. The county search and rescue team was mobilizing, but the terrain was rugged, and time was critical with temperatures dropping toward evening. Mrs. Carter, now Ethan and Rusty's mentor, was at the Thompsons' home for a training session when her radio crackled with the news. She listened intently, her sharp eyes narrowing, then turned to Mark and Lisa, who were watching from the porch. This could be a chance for Ethan and Rusty to help, she said, her voice measured. Not in the field, Ethan's too young for that, but from a base camp. Rusty's nose is sharp and Ethan's intuition could guide him. It's a controlled setting and I'd be with them every step. She glanced at Ethan, who was tossing a scented toy for Rusty in the yard, the dog bounding after it with eager focus. Lisa's heart clenched, her protective instincts flaring. He's only 8, Eleanor. What if something goes wrong? She gripped Mark's hand, her mind flashing to the storm, to Ethan alone in the woods. Yet she saw the spark in her son's eyes, the way he and Rusty moved as one. Their bond a force she couldn't deny. Mark, his carpenter's hands steady but his voice cautious, nodded. What would he do, exactly? We need to know he's safe. His trust in Ethan's gift had grown, but so had his resolve to protect him. Mrs. Carter outlined the plan. We'd set up at the trailhead, where the team's staging. Ethan and Rusty would stay there, away from the rough terrain. Rusty can pick up a scent from an item of Jenna's clothing, and Ethan can help interpret his signals. I'll handle the radio to relay their findings to the team. It's low risk and it could make a difference. Jenna's been out there for hours. Ethan, catching the serious tone, approached with Rusty at his side, the dog's tail wagging, but his ears pricked with alertness. "Is someone lost?" he asked, his dark eyes searching Mrs. Carter's face. "Can we help find them?" Mrs. Carter knelt to his level, her voice gentle but firm. "Maybe, Ethan, but only if your parents say yes, and only if you promise to stay with me and do exactly as I say. Rusty's ready, but this is serious work. Can you handle that?" Ethan nodded, his small face set with the same determination. That had led him to Rusty in the storm. "Rusty wants to help. He's telling me he can find her." Rusty nudged Ethan's hand, a soft whine escaping, as if eager to prove it. Mark and Lisa exchanged a long look, their love for Ethan weighing against the chance to let his gift shine. "If you're sure it's safe," Lisa said finally, her voice trembling but resolute. "And you stay with him every second." "I will," Mrs. Carter promised. "He's not just a kid out there, he's part of a team." Within the hour, they were at the trailhead, a clearing buzzing with search and rescue volunteers, their radios crackling and maps spread on folding tables. Ethan, bundled in a jacket, stood beside Mrs. Carter, Rusty on a leash at his side. The dog's nose twitched, already alert, his training kicking in. A volunteer handed Mrs. Carter a scarf from Jenna's backpack, and she held it out to Rusty, letting him sniff deeply. "Okay, Rusty," she said. "Find her." Ethan closed his eyes, his hand on Rusty's back, tuning into the dog's instincts. The images came quickly. Rusty's excitement, a faint trail of scent leading toward a rocky ridge. "He's got something," Ethan said, his voice steady. "It's that way where the trail splits. She's near water, but it's not deep." He pointed northeast, his small finger sure. Mrs. Carter raised an eyebrow, but trusted him, relaying the information to the team leader via radio. "Rusty's indicating northeast, near the stream by the ridge. Ethan says it's shallow water." The leader, a grizzled man named Captain Hayes, nodded, dispatching a group of searchers in that direction. He glanced at Ethan, curiosity flickering in his eyes, but time was too tight for questions. As the searchers fanned out, Ethan and Rusty stayed at the base, the dog circling restlessly, his nose to the ground. Ethan's focus never wavered, his connection to Rusty guiding him like a compass. "She's tired," he said suddenly, his brow furrowing. "Rusty says she's sitting, not moving much. There's a big rock near her, shaped like a chair." Mrs. Carter relayed the details, her voice calm but tinged with awe as the radio crackled with updates. Minutes stretched into an hour, the sun dipping lower, but then the radio burst to life. "We've got her," a searcher reported, "northeast by the stream under a chair-shaped boulder. She's dehydrated but okay." Cheers erupted at the base, volunteers clapping and hugging. Mrs. Carter grinned, ruffling Ethan's curls. "You did it, kid. You and Rusty." Ethan's face lit up, and he hugged Rusty tightly, the dog licking his cheek with joyful energy. "Good boy, Ethan," whispered, his voice thick with pride. Rusty's tail wagged furiously, as if he knew the weight of their success. Mark and Lisa, watching from the edge of the clearing, rushed to embrace their son, their fears easing into overwhelming pride. "You're amazing," Lisa said, tears in her eyes. Mark nodded, his voice gruff. "Both of you." The community's admiration grew as word of Ethan and Rusty's role spread. Captain Hayes approached, crouching to Ethan's level. "You've got a real talent, son. That dog trusts you, and you gave us a head start we needed. Ever think about doing this more?" Ethan's shy smile was answer enough, his new purpose taking root. As they drove home, Ethan leaned against Rusty in the back seat, whispering, "We found her, boy. We're a team now." The hills of Willow Creek stretched out in the twilight, a quiet promise of more lives to touch, more missions to come. The autumn leaves in Willow Creek glowed with hues of amber and crimson, a vibrant backdrop to a town that had weathered a storm and emerged stronger. The successful rescue of Jenna, the lost hiker, had rippled through the community, cementing Ethan and Rusty's place as local heroes. The 8-year-old boy and his golden Labrador, whose bond had defied explanation, were no longer just a heartwarming story. They were a symbol of hope, a testament to what love, instinct, and a unique gift could achieve. As winter approached, the Thompsons stood at the cusp of a new chapter, their lives forever changed by Ethan's journey and the purpose he and Rusty had found. In the weeks following the hiker's rescue, Ethan and Rusty officially joined Willow Creek's volunteer search and rescue team, under Mrs. Carter's strict supervision. Training sessions became a regular part of their routine, held in the fields behind the community center, where Rusty honed his scent-tracking skills and Ethan learned to interpret his signals. Mrs. Carter, with her decades of experience, tailored the program to keep Ethan safe, ensuring he worked only from base camps, relaying Rusty's findings via radio. "So you're the brains, Ethan," she'd say, her eyes twinkling. "Rusty's the nose, and together you're unstoppable." Ethan thrived in the role, his quiet confidence growing with each drill. His gift, his ability to sense animals, emotions and memories, became a cornerstone of their work, guiding Rusty with a precision that left even seasoned rescuers in awe. During one practice, when Rusty hesitated between two scent trails, Ethan closed his eyes and said, "He's picking up the stronger one. It's the red scarf, not the blue." Sure enough, Rusty led them to the hidden red scarf, earning a round of applause from the team. Captain Hayes, the grizzled search leader, shook his head, muttering, "Kid's got a sixth sense." Mark and Lisa, initially hesitant, embraced Ethan's new path, their trust in Mrs. Carter and the team easing their fears. They attended every training session, watching their son blossom into a role that seemed tailor-made for him. Lisa, ever protective, kept a close eye on Ethan's well-being, ensuring the responsibility didn't overwhelm him. "You tell us if it's too much, okay?" she'd say, brushing his curls back. Ethan would nod, his smile bright. "It's what I'm supposed to do, Mom. Rusty and me. We're meant to help." Rusty, fully recovered, was a picture of vitality, his golden fur gleaming as he bounded through drills with the enthusiasm of a young pup. His past as a search and rescue dog, uncovered by Mrs. Carter, had been rekindled, and Ethan's presence seemed to unlock a deeper layer of his instincts. The Labrador would sit patiently as Ethan relayed his insights to the team, his tail thumping. As if proud of their partnership, neighbors seeing them train would stop to cheer, their pride in the duo a warm thread woven into Willow Creek's fabric. The community's support was unwavering. Mrs. Henderson organized a fundraiser to buy equipment for the team, with Ethan and Rusty as the stars of a small ceremony. Sarah Lopez baked bone-shaped cookies for Rusty and handed Ethan a handwritten note. "You're our hero." Even old Mr. Peterson, rarely seen outside his porch, hobbled to a training session declaring, "That boy and his dog are Willow Creek's heart." The town, once battered by the storm, found healing in Ethan and Rusty's story, a reminder of resilience and connection. At home, the Thompsons adjusted to their new reality. Ethan's gift, once a source of worry, was now a source of pride, though Mark and Lisa remained vigilant, ensuring he balanced training with school and play. They met with Dr. Patel to discuss Ethan's role, grateful for her assurance that Rusty's health was robust enough for the work. "He's thriving because of Ethan," she said, showing them charts of Rusty's recovery. "Their bond is unlike anything I've studied. It's magic, for lack of a better word." One quiet evening, as snow dusted Willow Creek's hills, Ethan and Rusty curled up on the living room rug, a fire crackling in the hearth. Mark and Lisa sat nearby, watching their son sketch a picture of Rusty bounding through a field. "What's next for you two?" Mark asked, his voice warm with curiosity. Ethan looked up, his pencil pausing. "We're going to find them all," he whispered, his eyes shining with a vision only he could see. "Anyone who's lost, anyone who needs us. Rusty says we can." The Labrador lifted his head, his brown eyes meeting Ethan's, a soft whine sealing their pact. Lisa's heart swelled, and she reached for Mark's hand, their love for Ethan a quiet anchor. The sketch, later pinned to the fridge, became a symbol of that promise, a boy and his dog, ready for adventures yet to come. Willow Creek, too, looked forward, its people inspired by the duo who'd turned a storm's chaos into a legacy of hope. Training sessions continued, each one sharpening Ethan and Rusty's skills, preparing them for future missions. Mrs. Carter, ever the mentor, began planning certifications, dreaming of a day when Ethan, older and ready, might lead searches alongside. Rusty. As the first snow fell, Ethan and Rusty stood outside, the dog's nose twitching at the crisp air. Ethan tilted his head, catching a faint feeling from Rusty, joy, purpose, a readiness for whatever lay ahead. "We're just getting started, boy," he said, his breath puffing in the cold. Rusty barked, a joyful sound that echoed across the valley, and together they turned toward home, their silhouettes framed against the snowy hills. The future stretched before them, bright with possibility. Ethan's gift, once a mystery, was now a guiding light, not just for him and Rusty, but for all of Willow Creek. The town, bound by their story, knew that whatever challenges came, storms, lost souls, or moments of doubt, Ethan and Rusty would face them together, their bond a beacon of hope that would shine for years to come.